serious? What's the creepiest, scariest thing you've seen, but no one believes you? I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood, a few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night, uneventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going into work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute, and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning, and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5 something in the AM. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I'd just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't tired, no one could have slipped anything in either of the turquoise lights I'd had, no known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. I was walking to class from the dining hall on my campus when I saw a lady yelling for help and banging on a window of a nearby building. Lots of people were walking past, but I was the only one who seemed to acknowledge it. I went to the window to help, and she told me she was locked in a room in the building, and that she needed me to come in and open the door. Now, I have no idea the layout of this building and where she was located. So I decided to call campus security for help despite her pleading with me not to call them and to just let her out. I call them, and when I hear them coming I go to greet them so I can take them to the window. I leave for maybe a maximum of 15 seconds, and when I return with campus security she is gone. We can't see her at the window, and campus security goes inside to double check, and sure enough there is no trace of her. Campus security definitely thought I was crazy, and I'm sure my professor thought I was full of shit when I explained to him why I was late. No one seems to believe me that this happened, but I swear it did. When I was around 9 or 10, this guy who looked about 40 just kept being in every single public place I was in. With my parents or not, he was there. At the store, yes he was there, bought everything me and my family bought. In school, yes, he was staring at me on the other side of the school gate. Out in the city, yes, following me in the streets. I told my parents so many times and they just ignored me and said I need to stop believing everything my brother says, since my brother was really into creepy stuff at the time. He was 14. One day this guy just disappeared. The next thing I knew was that one of my friends kept seeing the guy everywhere. She many times pointed that the guy was outside the school gate watching her. I never saw him on the other side of the gate. Then she told me the guy disappeared after a few weeks. Then this other kid started telling everyone about the guy following him. About 7 months passed and I moved to another town. Still gives me creeps. I was at this scene of a suicide, work related. Guy shot himself with a shotgun, right under the chin. When I walked in, a black cat was sitting in his blood and staring at me. Really weird. Edit. For the ones calling bullshit, that's cool lol. The wife called us. His wife and kid came running out of the house past me as I got there. The detectives came out after the fact. And it was his own cat. Had my laptop in my bed just before going to sleep, not plugged in, on battery. Made an offhand comment on some website about how I wasn't scared of ghosts and didn't believe in them. Then I turned it off and went to sleep with the laptop beside me in my bed. Next morning when I try to power it on, nothing happens. But the laptop feels unusually light. That's when I realized the battery had been physically removed and placed in the kitchen. I was alone in my apartment and do not have a history of sleepwalking at all. Disgruntled ghost carrying your battery to the kitchen. I'll teach him not to believe in ghosts. I saw a panther-sized black cat darting out of a water retention artificial forest near a school in the desert. Logically, it shouldn't be able to survive there, but holy shit, I saw it. Animal control wouldn't let that exist. There isn't really food enough for it, and the summers get dangerously hot if you've got black fur. Must have been 4-5 feet long. It doesn't make sense, but I 100% saw it, and so did the friend I was with. In the same room of my old house, I have seen a convulsed face floating outside my window. My brother has also seen it too. I saw the same face over a number of periods, and it would do stuff like smile and float closer and further from the glass. Our youngest brother a few years later complained that he didn't want to play with a boy in his room anymore as he was getting too much blood on his toys. It was the same room. Not quite sure how young I was at the time, but it was probably between 5 and 8. I was in my babysitter bed at the time in her trailer park. It was 3 AM. I had woken up because I had to pee. When I woke up, I looked down the hallway to see my babysitter leaning against the wall like one of the stereotypical cool guys do in movies. And I made eye contact and I felt my body go cold because she was still sound asleep next to me in bed. I went under the blankets trying to hide, and when I looked back she was gone. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I've never told anyone. I just sat in her bed watching infomercials until 6 AM when she woke up. Never even thought about sleeping there again. I honestly forget how much this affected me until I started writing this. Really freaked me out, man. Edit. Since I never told anyone, I'd care if it belongs here, but no one in my family believes in ghosts, so if I were to tell them, I guarantee it'd be dismissed. So I was getting on the elevator in the metro. To get from the train platform to the main platform with the turnstiles and exit, you have to take the elevator. So I got on with this older guy. It was just us two, and I glanced over and this guy was watching me. Pointedly. And he was smiling, but not in a nice, welcoming way. You know, in cliche creepypastas where they talk about monsters with unnaturally wide smiles? That's exactly the kind of smile this guy had. Anyway, I looked away from him because I thought he was just crazy or something. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw him making these weird gestures all over his chest. It almost looked like he was making the sign of the cross or something. Finally, the elevator doors opened, and we both got off and walked towards the turnstiles. I swiped my card to exit, and then turned around to see if this dude was following me, and he was gone. There was nowhere else he could have gone. We were at the only exit for the station. Unless he turned back, ran and got on another elevator in about 4 seconds. I don't know. I don't know where the fuck he went. Anyway, I'm from a small town and sometimes weird things happen in the city that I don't quite understand, but I just chalk it up to me being practically a redneck. But this was really out there, and it's been bothering me. Ghost story time. I was living with a few of my friends a year and a half ago, and we're all pretty religious. At least 2 of us work in religion. We were talking about how we didn't believe in ghosts or demons, at least in the sense that we couldn't see them if they were real. We started talking about how if we saw one it would change our perspective entirely. I said out loud, if something is here, I wish it would just show us. 2 nights later I'm sound asleep and have the most vivid, brutal nightmare I've ever had. Long story short, I was in my childhood house. We were getting robbed, and the robber shot my father, only it was me. I was the robber. My father and I had a very strained relationship, and the detail of the shooting woke me up in tears. I mean, I was sobbing. I looked at the foot of my bed and saw a man sitting on his heels staring at me. It looked like he was 80 years old but never hit puberty. That's as best I can describe it. His face looked kind, but his eyes looked so wicked it struck terror into my soul. He almost looked curious, but morbidly so. He was wearing clothes that looked like he was a newspaper salesman from 1890s New York. I only saw him for a split second, and he was gone. The wild thing is, I got all of that detail in just a split second, like he wanted me to remember him. Here's the crazy part. So I was spooked to shit, right? I went into our living room and watched YouTube and some Twitch streams for a bit until I convinced myself I was just half asleep and still spooked. I lay back in bed And the moment my head hits the pillow, my roommate sits straight up in bed, still asleep, points at the foot of my bed and says, "My name. Who is that?" I lost my goddamn mind. I literally drove home at 3 AM and told my parents through tears I wanted to stay home until summer. I stayed at home for a week or so and then went back. My roommates started having regular night terrors after that, but we moved soon after. I've never been so scared in all of my life. I've been reading these stories for well over an hour, past 4 AM now, and I was too afraid to get up and pee, but reading this almost made me wet my bed.